I mean, this is going to be a heavy topic. This is going to be pretty dense.
Topic. Got a whole monologue and everything. I'm excited. I'm excited to hear what you have to say about this.
And the reality is, we got to dive in and take this serious. And it's a complicated topic because I'm not one without a heart. And I recognize the nuances and multiple facets to these issues. And I think because they're so sensitive, it prevents us from actually diving into those nuances. So let's get in the nitty-gritty of our border crisis as people are flooding into Arizona and Texas and New Mexico and all the other countries. But mainly, we've got a crisis currently as we speak, predominantly in Texas and Arizona. Migrant crossings along the U.S.-Mexico border are rising, surpassing 8,600 over a 24-hour period this week, according to a Department of Homeland Security official. That's up from 3,500 daily border arrests after the expiration of Title 42 in May, which at the time triggered new consequences for those who crossed the border illegally when Trump was president. Title 42 was an order created during the COVID era, which allowed authorities to swiftly expel migrants at U.S. borders. Migrants encountered under Title 42 have been either returned to their home countries or sent back into Mexico. Under the policy, authorities have expelled migrants at the U.S.-Mexico border more than 2.8 million times since the policy began, according to U.S. Customs and Border Protection data. About 6,500 migrants are in custody in El Paso alone, which only has so many resources, Mayor Oscar Leeser said at the news conference this past Saturday. We have come to what we look at as a breaking point right now, the mayor said. Border Patrol's top cop said Sunday that smugglers are to blame for the latest migrant surge. Smugglers are illegally crossing these big groups for financial gain and using them as a distraction to run deadly narcotics and violent criminals into the U.S., according to U.S. Border Patrol Chief Jason Owens. Now, let me break down exactly what that says. They're saying these smugglers of illegal activity are coming across the big groups that are just looking to come to America for financial opportunities and using them to run narcotics and violent crime. According to Mexico's National Migration Institute, Mexico had deported more than 788,000 migrants to their home countries from January 1st to September currently. Mexican officials vowed to carry out a series of 15 actions as part of their agreement to aid the crisis, which includes deporting migrants to their home countries by land and air. This isn't the first time Mexico has agreed to help the U.S. with immigration enforcement. In 2019, said Mexico's massive deployment of National Guard's troops had played a major role in blocking migrants' efforts to reach the border. However, a New York Times article from 2019 directly contradicts this position, claiming it was the intervention of the U.S. National Guard that actually protected against the wave of immigrants. With 5,900 troops initially deployed and an undisclosed number of troops that were deployed following that, this is how we were able to curve the wave back in 2019. According to a report by CNN, as of Friday, September 22nd, another 800 new active duty personnel are being sent to the border, where 2,500 National Guard members are already serving, as announced by the Department of Homeland Security officials in a call Wednesday night with reporters. In addition to this, the administration announced this week it would further expand deportations to include more families, as a signal that children cannot be used to sidestep the immigration process. At the same time, the administration is expanding work permit access and deportation protections for Venezuelans. The temporary protected status expansion announced by Homeland Security on Wednesday will be available to 472,000 Venezuelans, almost 500 million. These moves come along with parole processes for Cubans, Haitians, Venezuelans, and Nicaraguans announced earlier this year. The combined effort is intended to create an orderly decision-making process, because we don't want to make it too easy for them to come through. Ensure more eligible immigrants can work while bluntly denying those with invalid claims to remain in the U.S. The U.S. Border Patrol made 181,000 apprehensions along the southern border in August, which is up from 132,000 in July, according to the latest Customs and Border Patrol data. Finally, according to ABC News, officials emphasize that much of the migration is driven by transnational criminal organizations engaged in big business of human smuggling. Before I continue with the rest of how I want to address these situations, what do you make of this problem, David?
Well, this has been a problem we've had for quite a while. It seems like it's been stemming back since I think since we've been alive. There's always been a demand and a need for immigrants to come over. Immigrants, unfortunately it's a better life for them over here than it is for them over there. Where I wish they would expend some of that energy is making their life better there. And you
Yes.
have but you see desperate situations, and when you have desperate measures, you people that take advantage of that desperation. So you're seeing the coyotes, and you're seeing those who are using it as a human trafficking opportunity. They're seeing it as a drug smuggling opportunity. They're seeing all sorts of different facets where they can use these desperate individuals to get them across the border. And where this gets where it gets real tricky here for me, because I have so much sympathy for those who make that long journey. And it's a dangerous journey. It's not easy. It's not a walk in the park. And they risk their lives, come over here for a better life because they want to be part of the American dream. There's something symbolic about that with America, how we founded this country, and how our ideals come across. But we can't have an open border system, and we can't have a immigration style system, and at the same time have entitlements and benefits that go out. There's going to be a certain point here where my biggest concern with all of this, especially with the Venezuelan point, is we see a labor crunch now, and that labor crunch is helping the average American worker. It's helping those individuals who come out and work every day, the 9 to 5s, the blue collars, and it's driving their daily income up. When we see these worker, or when we see these Venezuelans, or other immigrants that come in even legally, you're driving down that price. You're driving down the value of that labor. And for a movement that's just kind of been stagnated for so long, now we just see an opportunity. You said that they're having 300 to 500,000 people come in, and
That's just
that's
Venezuelans through this one policy,
yeah, that's a
right? That's
significant
not in
amount.
addition to all of the other, migrants that are taking or claiming this emergency status and coming through Mexico and even our sea borders, right?
Yeah.
So, putting up an actual wall or just direct, and it's funny, we're talking about the National Guard. It's like, yeah, we criticize Trump, but then we spend even more for a human wall, right? And that makes more sense to take your brothers and your sons and throw them at the, first line of defense than an inanimate object. That's a better expense of your money. But I think on balance with having a heart and how you present it, I totally agree, man. I come from families of immigrants, and they sought out a new hope and new opportunity, and they were able to capitalize on that, which is great. But I also recognize it's a very difficult process.
Mhm.
One of the things you said that triggered something for me immensely is I definitely implore anybody listening to this to go Google or go to YouTube and search immigration marble example.
Mhm.
And it's like some TED talk. It's something I've shown so many times to people. And it's a gentleman that has these towers of marbles. And he goes to show how if one of these marbles is the 1 million 1 million people,
Mhm.
and he like takes the 2 million taken a year and puts it on top, and he goes, okay, so if this country, this country, and this country, and this country, all of them are suffering, and we take 2 million out of the suffering and bring them into us, did we solve suffering? No. And how many of those do we need to bring over to here to solve the suffering over here? And when you see it and the numbers are so clear, you're forced to confront the fact that the only way to solve this problem is to fix and address the issues where they are at. That if they're needing to flee out of disparity and danger, well, let's make it less desperate and dangerous.
Yeah.
Versus taking on something that at some point there's a breaking, and I'm going to get into that, but there is a breaking point. There's only a certain capacity to this. And at some point, the bubble's going to burst, and you and the person you're trying to save will both lose the fruits of that.
Yeah, we can't take everyone in. We can't take everyone on. No country can. No country has the ability to. And I want to bring up another point here with that announcement of the Venezuelan program. When you have you have an immigrant that comes in illegally, that somewhat happens in a bit of a vacuum because you don't know about it. There's no data on it. They have to scrounge and kind of work within the shadows, and that isn't publicly available information. This Venezuelan program, this isn't operating in the vacuum. This is essentially telling the job market, hey, we got a quarter to a half million people here willing to work, willing to do some of these jobs. And now the income elevation is just going to be lessened. And is this by design? Is this
Huh.
Is
As
this
milk and property and everything else becomes less and less affordable?
Yeah, is this our government working against us because they're trying to drive a point here with the labor movement? Or is this
I don't even know it's the labor movement, dude.
You don't think
They're
so?
trying to break us. Like, again, we're more connected now than we've ever been before. Back to solving the problem. Like, look at the map, right? And like to solve the problems of places miles and miles and miles away where things are so much worse. How do you start addressing those things? Well, again, you don't even know about the plights of those people without the interconnectivity of our devices. Like, again, before you used to be able to throw your head in the sand and ignore that they even exist. Now we have a whole generation of people that lived with, waking up at 2 a.m. and a white doctor in a Guatemalan village trying to tell you to donate $5 in the middle of the night. How many of you guys remember those commercials where you're just like, what?
All over the place.
Just like, please donate $1 because this starving person is going to break. And you're like, you're there. Give them your granola bar. But again, that confrontation doesn't even happen without this massive interconnectivity we're experiencing. So I think as that exponentially grows, let's agree, the end of this thing through probably 1,000 more years of fighting and death is going to lead to a world government, right? Like, I think the best way, my personal view, is that you have them still locally policed in states, like a model that we have, very localized policemen. But at the same time, the Kim Jong-uns and the Xi Jinpings and the Putins of the world are going to be snuffed out for the sake of humanity because it's just the inevitable evolution. So I think this is just one difficult confrontation of a problem that won't even exist in the morning or in the future.
I'm gonna push back on that a little bit because I think we've always seen groups of individuals that will team up together. Let's go Axis and allies.
Yeah.
So we have, and I think the faction we see right now is anyone on the petrodollar and the other. So they're trying to get the other world reserve currency that, I don't know, whatever China, India, Russia are trying to cook up there. Those are going to be the next world powers because what we see here here's the other facet of it too. We have the world's reserve currency, and we're able to print, and it's only somewhat rudimentary on our inflation. So we're able to help boost our economy. We're able to do a bunch of things to actually help us on the American side of things, where you have countries like Venezuela and other, South American countries, they print. They see hyperinflation, runaway inflation. It's like Brazil is a great example of what they call a second world economy or a second world power, like a third world country, first world country, or a second world country, because their government is just all in for themselves, all that corruption. You have the people and the infrastructure to actually make it a very vivid and very great economy. But I think there's some aspects of us also pushing down other economies so that
Oh,
they
totally.
won't get in the way of us, and that our consolation prizes, hey, we'll take some immigrant off hands here. We'll make it a little less apprehensive for you here. And I think with Venezuela, so what's interesting about this one as well, remember back when gas started to get a little expensive with the Russian-Ukraine war, Biden was going to, or the Biden administration was going to Venezuela and going, hey, we need you to keep pumping. We need you to keep getting this oil out here, so we need to be cheaper. Is this part of the concessions that he made? Are these 300 to 500,000 people not fans of the Venezuelan government? Now that's conspiracy hat theory time, but I legitimately think deals are made like this all the time. It would make sense to me if all right, I'm in charge of Venezuela. Hey, you're going to be, if I'm going to keep pumping oil, keep exporting oil to you, you need to kind of help things on my end here. And I got a group of individuals who are not a fan of me that would love to be in America right now. How about you give them a path to do that, and I can work on the oil on your end? I think that's probably more or less what's going on here.
But see, I hear you, and I would not be surprised because that is the operative mode our government usually defaults to. But what's interesting about this current crisis we're facing, numbers are, showing Venezuela, that's a current policy passed this week.
Yep.
But at the border of Mexico is a flood of not just Venezuelan immigrants, but South American immigrants all over. And there's a policy protecting Venezuelans. And I think you may have touched upon a political incentive to creating such a thing.
Yep.
But in regards to the crisis currently, that's just something compounding on what's making an already worse situation even more severe. Brian, do you have something for us? Or you just indicating the time? What's up?
Indicating the time.
Gotcha.
All
right.
Let's get your second half of your monologue here. I want to hear
Here's
your
the
other
biggest
half of this.
part, and this is what I want you to consider what purpose borders serve.
Okay.
And this kind of addresses why it's not just the Venezuelans, but the overarching problem all over. Walls around the edges of what one owns have been an element of national security policy from at least since the Chinese emperor threw up the Great One in 221 BC to hold back neighboring Mongol and Turkish tribes, and denying that these generally help to keep rowdy neighbors out is disrespectful and a denial of the obvious. Mexico herself has a heavily and effectively fortified southern border that is frequently described as walled. And the 143-mile-long steel fence recently constructed along Israel's borders cut illegal migration from poorer Middle Eastern nations by almost 99%. There is essentially no doubt that considering similar hard barriers just under America, combined with equally simple policy moves like mandating the adoption of E-Verify software by U.S. employers, would have a similar effect on migration rates here. Not only would a 1-2 punch policy like the one just outlined be practically doable, but we, the people, have every logical reason to want our bumbling leaders to do it. Illegal immigrants for a modern welfare state are prohibitively expensive. Nationally, according to the Center for Immigration Studies, an astounding 63% of all recent immigrant households benefit from one or more of the USA's buffet of welfare programs, including a special supplement nutrition program for women, infants, and children, and supplemental nutrition assistance program platforms, Medicaid, and subsidized Section 8 housing. Now, consider when we talk about Section 8 housing, I'm all for that, but when we're putting a stay on evictions and we're preventing landlords from collecting money, but we're still charging them real estate tax, who are we really? Why do I want to be a part of your country or be a part of the social contract and pay your taxes and pay in the system you benefit from if people who aren't even from here, they benefit from the house that I'm trying to collect money on, don't ever have to even pay into it or pay me? It is worth briefly noting here, while the old canard that immigrants can't get welfare is still often correct, the American policy of birthright citizenship means that all U.S.-born children of immigrants, including the children of 2 illegal aliens, are legal citizens who qualify as beneficiaries for every program I just named. As a result of some expenses of this kind and many more short-term costs, like the cost of providing temporary housing for thousands of illegals shipped to his sanctuary city in New York City, Mayor Eric Adams was recently forced to announce an upcoming 5% cut in the budget for every NYC agency. And of course, I get tickled pink at the news of cutting down agencies and their fundings. However, this is a misappropriation of funds, and that cutting is not going to affect what we actually want to see, but it's going to hinder those actually trying to address these situations. The progressives will tell you that all of those train riding blue collar men who look so much like plain old illegal immigrants are in fact asylum seekers or refugees whom no moral state could turn away. However, this is untrue to a rather remarkable degree. There are no current ethnic wars in such common source countries for migrants as Mexico, Guatemala, India, China, Dominican Republic, which might cause average citizens to flee persecution on account of race, religion, or nationality, those being the terms required to seek or claim asylum or refuge, and have a duty owed to you. Many of these nations are not even particularly dangerous in terms of common crime. The murder rate in India appears to be roughly 3 murders per 100,000 citizens. And in Latin America's El Salvador, it fell from 106 murders per 100,000 people to 7.6, following current President Buckles' decision to crack down on the country's crime gangs. In comparison to the murder rate in U.S. cities, Baltimore alone, which has a 58.27 murders per 100,000 people. Additionally, per the traditional first safe country principle, potential asylees escaping racial or political violence in their own country have a duty to seek harbor, logically, in the first stable nation they arrive in after fleeing. A Venezuelan driven by civil unrest would pass through Panama, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Guatemala, Belize, Mexico, among other countries, before getting to the home of the brave, and could stop in relative safety in any of them. Illegal immigrants do not do that for a very good reason. Almost all of them are, in fact, job-seeking economic migrants. Who has ever previously seen a group of self-proclaimed refugees with almost no women, children, or old men in it? And an annual per capita GDP for these countries is ranging about 3,000, 4,000, and at most 10,000, where in the United States it's 80,000. Ignoring reality of this kind is absurd, and we could stop doing it today or tomorrow. Young men willing to ride in an unair-conditioned freight train across Mexico in order to get into the USA and work are likely, on average, great guys, but there are many great guys and girls inside this country currently. The United States has her own legitimate interests, and we have no moral duty whatsoever to let in a stream of master carpenters from Monterey because they lie and claim to be fleeing persecution. That we need to have borders, or it all dissolves and crumbles and is for naught.
Yeah, we need to stake our claim, stake our territory, and we need to have an identity of the country, just like those coming across the border have their own identity and have their own values and structure. You get to, and you have the great replacement theory. I think sometimes gets thrown around a little bit, but I think there is definitely if I'm an honest to God Texan and I'm born and raised generational Texan, I don't want to see that culture. And I don't want to see that my way of life change because of a lack of policy and a lack of enforcement over our own country's rules. This isn't it. They're legal. It's not a we can have sympathy. There can be avenues to citizenship, and I don't think there's too many. I highly doubt that's even political or even controversial in a sense. It's the mass of it. It's a never ending wave for this. I'll take a little bit of that really is starting to become concerning. And I guess it's always been concerning, but at this point now, when we start to see some of these, and again, I'll go back to the labor movement here, when we start seeing that, it's just dragging us down to a point where there is, like you said, there is going to be a breaking point. There is going to be a spot in which, we've gone over the horizon. There's no point. There's no turning back now. When do you think that point will be?
Well, so here's what's interesting, and that's what was so alarming, and what I had compelled me to make this kind of a pivotal, piece to our dialogue today, is that the videos coming from this past week. I wish I had some of them to share, but like some of the videos of these borders, it's like Red Rover, come over. It's just a flood of people taking advantage of they can catch us all.
Yep.
And they're just flooding the border, and most of it is unwalled and barely manned. So part of the problem is, again, I'll acknowledge most of them probably great people and will probably benefit our society.
Yeah.
But what's sneaking among them into our country? So we've seen a major uptick in China's investment in sneaking heroin and fentanyl. They are they're the main exporter of fentanyl. I mean, they are the ones shipping fentanyl into Mexico and into us to kill us. Because what's the one thing America's known for? We are the hardest military to beat, not because we're the most expensive on the books, what you see, but we're called the sleeping dragon, and that all of our citizens are a sleeping army waiting, itching to pull out their guns. And so how do you start even beginning to chip away at that? You start dulling them. You start killing them, getting them addicted to poison. And so not only is it economically detrimental for all the reasons you raise, you're going to see it affect our economy and our professional workplace. And it isn't because it's not that I hate the clown wearing the blue jersey in the audience right now going, he's just one of those, they take our germs. No, nobody's taking that position. Nobody has taken that position for 15 years. That is not a problem. And if you are a hardworking benefit to my society, I want you. The only thing I ask is for you to be legally paying into the system that also provides all these welfare benefits, because you don't get the benefit without also paying into the system. So what gets me worked up is, yes, you're seeing an economic Trojan horse, and it's hidden under the guise of have a heart, there's great potential, they're good people. But that's the major distraction from what is actually, they're trying to flood us with migrants that'll dissolve our economy. But even more so, if you could keep the border a sieve, you can sneak in any problem you want. And so, what is it? MS-13, you've got a whole gang that runs people.
Yeah.
And you've got China invested in running in drugs that are, fentanyl is our killer, number one killer. And we're looking at our number one enemy, and they are the pivotal reason it's coming right up through us.
I think it's an argument also. Well, this is one of the bigger arguments to decriminalize drugs and definitely legalize tax. I'm not the biggest fan of a government getting into a new avenue of taxing us, but definitely you start seeing some of the benefits come downstream of that. 'Cause a lot of that's just a market of people willing to do anything to get over here, and people willing to go, hey, I'm going to pay for whatever he's got going on over here. So I don't know if I necessarily agree with the China aspect that China's using it to kill us. I do think it's easier to probably import fentanyl from China to Mexico. Like, it's for the Mexican government, it's probably really easy to do that, where the United States are, hey, we don't necessarily want that here unless it's our own pharmaceutical companies. But having said that, definitely when you have an regulated process with individuals who have no, their only savior is the dollar sign. So it doesn't matter if I kill 100 people, 1,000 people, a million people, as long as I get this fentanyl in here and someone pays me for it. That's not my problem. That's their problem. So you have these single factor decision making going on, and it's going to eventually start creeping up. I think the other reason why this is becoming more and more of a topic is you're starting to see we're as just a society in America going down south. We're going away from the Rust Belt. We're going away from the North. We're going down to Texas. Texas, one of the big immigration state, or one of the big states from just local, United States citizens going down there. Then in Florida, one of the two biggest immigration states as
Yeah.
far as legal immigrants are coming through. So you're starting to see more and more individuals are getting assimilated into the consequences of at least border policy that isn't quite as rigorous as even I wasn't even agree. I think we could be a lot more rigorous than even Trump was in most cases. And I don't even see a wall really being all that. This is another one of these topics that I have where I just don't see the political the other side of the politics really starting to hammer home, because it all comes down to a racist topic. It's all like, well, you don't like this because you're racist. I don't think so. I don't like the idea that we're flooding people here in a legal process, and then the unintended consequences coming from that. That's the biggest issue. And I think if we keep it away from, well, it's Mexicans, that doesn't matter. I don't care if it's Canadians.
Exactly.
We want to make sure those who are coming in for the proper purpose. And even if it's economic, okay, well, there's an avenue, there's a channel, there's all sorts of different things that come through here. Now, I do have a question for you here. Now, this is going more on legal immigration. H1, I think, is it H1B visas?
Yeah.
What's your thought process on those?
So the problem is that's not the problem. There are so many different avenues to getting a visa or immigrant, just any kind of citizenship or whatever. The problem is there's a language barrier. People are coming in. Most of the people, like, again, a doctor is not going to have as hard of a time getting in here, not only because they're the type of people we want. So, of course, the process is kind of catered that, but even more so, they have the capacity to navigate more on their own. So, a poor person that can't afford an attorney. So, most of those immigration attorneys are doing it out of the kindness of their heart through donation. And that's a rarity. Okay. Most attorneys are in it for the money. That might surprise you.
Nope.
There's a stereotype for a reason.
That might be a hot take.
So there's not a lot of options for them for legal assistance.
Okay.
And that kind of pigeonholes the market. Naturally, those with a higher capacity navigate it with an easier ability. And the system's kind of catered to making it easier for them because that's what you want. Do you want, the guy that ran a deli or a doctor? Both valuable, and I don't want to take away from either. But if there is a stereotype for capacity, there's a likelihood of one over the other. So why do you ask? What are you prying at?
So I think the H-1B visas might be a very sinister play to. Did you see? So, what's the process of an H-1B visa? If you're a company that's hiring for a very specific task and you can't find someone locally, but there's someone out there in another country that's willing to do that job and take that job. Well, that seems like benefit to the company. That seems like a benefit to the other employees. So they're doing a job. You're spreading out the workload. But where you're starting to see more and more of these come in is you're taking down the white collar workers' ability to be able to negotiate salaries, because now on the other hand you have, well, let's use a programmer, for example. I got a programmer from Japan, India, China, wherever. They're willing to work for a little bit less than you are, and they're willing to come over here. And then on the other hand of that, they're going to do what I say because I control their ability to be here.
So, but keep that in balance with one consideration.
Yep.
Do you think Steve Jobs, do you think he'd go, I love the fact that iPhones are made by slaves. Do you think he loves it? Or do you think he'd come up with some creative narrative as to why it's necessary and it's just kind of a symptom to the process? And if he had any control over it, he'd change it and X, Y, Z, Z, Y, right? You'd agree. At the same time, he'd just keep rambling and defending that. But let's agree that never goes away. Through human nature and the nature of corporations and money-driven board of investors, they will always choose the dollar, maximizing the dollar over what's right. Always.
True.
Even if it's close or even if it's a mind-blowing moral conundrum.
And they're
they
legally
will always choose money over morality. And so that being said, the reason it has to be this way is you've taken basic economics. You have an understanding of imports versus exports, right? Do you want to live in a world where, and this would become the case because this is the nature of America, my favorite love, but still my most evil damnation. The nature of America would result in our number one import being workers, period. So now you're going to have a citizenship of people with their thumb up their ass and nothing to do and nothing to make them money because there will always be a Venezuelan fighting over a chicken bone down to even give it a try. Even if I'm selling Snicker bars at the local deli, I will do it cheaper than whatever you're willing to pay. And if we don't make it stringent, our number one import by the nature of America is going to be cheap immigrant labor.
Well, and let's go on the other side of that coin too. A cheap immigrant labor, they're not getting paid a whole lot, so they're going to demand prices go down very low. So now, what's the unintended consequences of that? You have a population that is demanding low prices, and now unless you cater to that low price, you're not getting any business. So now it's a very big tumbleweed. It all trickles down to, you're like supply chain theory and say, hey, I need cheaper. And eventually we're just playing to the lowest common denominator. And now there's no margin for anybody. Now we're just playing this game of how cheap can I get it? And if there's no margin to pay people. There's no margin to pay talent. It's just all becoming. And then what morals do we give up? What ethics do we give up? What are we dumping in the river? What are we dumping in the ocean just to save $4 or $5 so that you have this population gets us? So a lot of this just comes downstream of what our quality of life. And then we're not seeing it now, but eventually, and I agree with you. I think we're eventually going to, if we keep it as open, if we don't start becoming a lot tighter with the way we do things, it's gonna become worse quickly in a hurry.
All right, going to Brian. Got any wrapping thoughts for us before we move on?
I don't know. I've had people come in to my life that are immigrants, and they've had difficulties with the way it's set up, and I think I don't know. I think there's a way to get it to be easier to filter out what we want and who we want, and opening up the borders I don't think was quite the right move, but yeah, I think you guys really
Part of the problem is you're vetting people, and that's not an easy process, right? Like you actually need to vet them, or it is just an open border and you're picking the first 2 million people you grab. Also, the number 2 million is a drop in the bucket in the terms of scale in a world of 4.5 billion. So part of the problem you face is you got friends that I'm sure are struggling, but they are amongst millions. And back to I think what kicked off our dialogue was you're not going to help those people by just picking put it in perspective. If there's 50 million people that would come here if we just totally opened up today, and you're only allowing 2 in, you're taking a 25th of people. Play the lottery game. Your friend has a 1 in 25th chance of getting in. I don't love that. I would love to make it easier, but also I need to recognize that I can't just throw away actually vetting people. That takes time, that takes resources and bodies to actually carry it out.
And it creates a difficult moral dilemma where are you?
Yeah,
you're-
who's the chooser? Are you
you-
God? Like,
yeah.
no, you don't want that either.
Yeah.
At the same time, though, when it's all said and done, it's still such a drop in the bucket compared to the massive problem that I love the position when you take where you're like, we need to help more of these people. That like seed of empathy is good. And I want to water it, and it's healthy to have. You want to go to Burger King with your friend, and unfortunately, Burger King is only here, and you're only here. So it's an uncomfortable suggestion of reality to say, hey, it's probably the best solve that that guy doesn't come here. We put a Burger King where he's at, and we make Silicon Valley mirrored where he's at, and hospitals mirrored the same where he's at, and education systems just as reliable where he's at. And no, that doesn't mean you'll get to run Burger King with him and kick it with him, but the solve to his struggles isn't a blind pick, a 1 in 25th chance of somebody getting to come. And now there's still 24, whatever that is, 96% of people that are still struggling. But me and my pals still get to go to Burger King. The solve is your pal's got to go back to where he came from, and we got to make that place better.
Let me get a little bit more specific. So, my friend has legally come over here. They got all their paperwork, and they are in the medical field. Pretty sure doctor level. And where they were practicing, in the country that they were practicing, they have gotten well certified and they have experience out in the field, and they're looking for a job here in the US. They have all their legal all their medical things have been taken care of as far as the US goes. And they are looking for a job, and no one will hire them because they got their official certification from outside the country. So now,
Well, that's just the source of a competitive market. At the same time, I go to
but
better.
how many places can they go before? How many places can they apply and interview with before it's like,
But
is
again,
it competitive or is it some kind of racism?
Is it exclusionary versus competitive?
Or it's
market?
a confidence in our education system over others, because I know it's just like how our dollar compares to other financial notes. At the same time, our education system, in the lens of the world, whether accurately or inaccurately, is viewed as a higher end education system, making them more valuable. So, one, that could be the case. Two, that could be wrong and we're not better. But guess what? American employers ignorantly definitely hold that perspective. They are definitely, and even if you're just a little bit better, if the cold-blooded American is the one that also serves the deal, why does Jocko Willink have a business, period? His coffee and shoes and clocks aren't the best, but what he can damn sure guarantee is it is made every bit in America, and it's overpriced for that reason, but there's a market for it, and that's what drives America, is market and demand. So one, employers could be wrong, but that is how they see the world. But two, I do truly think our education system is better, because I could take my law degree and go practice law. I could just walk in. I could just walk. Oh, I want to be a Greek attorney, or I want to go be an English attorney, or I want to go be a Chinese attorney. Like, you know who is going to show me racism? China. But also, that's their world. So who am I to tell them what to do? Because I live here, and I should worry about here.
I think another thing to consider on this one too is liability. So imagine you're taking in a doctor that has a different degree from a different country, and you have a malpractice situation. Next thing you know, you see, you're getting sued. Hospital getting sued. Now it seems like a slam dunk case. You might be able to test this here, Mr. Lawyer, that the case is probably easily drawn up. It's like, well, he's not from our education system. Whatever the malpractice is, you could probably frame it as, well, it's because of the lack of education. This employer willingly knew this, hired
it totally
him,
opens the door.
and now you're just in a situation where you're really putting your neck out there for someone. And if they're not immediately talented, and not to say this particular person is, but you have to be over the moon exceptional to take that type of risk. Does your ability outweigh
So
that
where
risk?
is he from? I'm just curious.
She's from Guatemala.
Okay. No offense to her, but just think about what you just said. I'm just gonna. It speaks for itself, Guatemala. But even beyond that, okay, we're talking about Guatemala, but also taking it a step further. How many other BRIC nations in other countries have also equally qualified doctors that also want to work in our hospitals? So let's take an example. Abu Dhabi. One thing I attribute to Abu Dhabi through when I took my research project there is that Abu Dhabi has nothing great of their own. What they've done there is gone and cherry-picked great things across the world and put them there. We're going to go take the Louvre, the greatest art museum. We're going to put a Louvre here. Why I bring that up is they went and grabbed a Cleveland Clinic, and now there is the most gorgeous building you will ever imagine, Cleveland Clinic in Abu Dhabi, one of the best hospitals in the world. So I'm just saying, when people cherry pick the greatest medicine, they're not taking a Guatemalan hospital. They're taking the Cleveland Clinic, and it's not just a Guatemalan doctor that's trying to come here and be successful at said Cleveland Clinic, but it's, what did I say? I threw my papers down, but of the poor countries trying to come to us, you've got Venezuela, you've got Costa Rica, you've got Peru, all of those countries, not to mention those across the pond. So you've got all of Europe, all of Asia. What about Australia? Australia is a country that very much mimics our society and economic understanding. There are probably very high caliber doctors that went to just as prestigious schools that want just as much the opportunity. Would it not solve the problem to make that opportunity more successful and fruitful where they're at? Or do we just, like the movie The Dark Knight, just snap a pool cue, throw it in the middle, and go, all the great doctors fight it for one in the end? Because we don't have the room for all of you. What are your thoughts? I know you're trying to jump in.
We did have a comment, and
Comment.
I do know that she did finish. She is board certified, so it's
U.S. board certified.
It's not an issue of competency.
I know. Don't take my comment as not. I'm definitely making a point, but about, okay.
Can I read the comment?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
We don't accept foreign residency training. All doctors have to complete an American residency to become board certified in the U.S.
Right. There you go.
Oh, so they have to go through a separate.
But do you not see? Do you think that person that went through that program to become board certified was the only one? Do we think it's a small demand? We're talking about an entire world of people that want that, and only one country serving it, right? They're not also throwing their hat in the ring and this is the place. They're all coming to the place. They're all reaching for the same thing, along with your brothers and sisters and cousins that did it here, that grew up here and paid into the system here and have been, like, again, your teacher aunt doesn't have a job without the American citizens that are already here. So we're going to step over them, ignore them, and we're going to consider just the very, very few, or we're going to consider the infinite number of people trying to get the very few number of spots.
Yeah. I'm not qualified enough to respond.
And again,
Yeah.
my heart goes to those people that are struggling. But I think a narrative I'd like to leave on is I think people get so lost in their own one single perspective that they lose sight of the fact that everybody has their own issues. Everybody is struggling and dealing with their own situations. And yeah, yours might be immigration related, but some might be dealing with like dire issues. Like some things everybody's got their struggle. They all come in waves. Yeah, you might be on a beach today for vacation, but you might be getting terrible news in a week. And that's how life in karma balances itself. So your struggle may form itself in that, but the white person born in America has a dad that drinks and beats them silly. Like everybody has their struggle. My heart goes out to you. Don't lose sight of the fact that everybody are dealing with their own things. My wrapping thought that I was going to say when it comes to immigration totally is this. I feel as if this is a pressing issue that is going to become increasingly more relevant. One of the conspiracy theorists that I listen to, he pulled the trigger and he's like, I don't think we're going to have an election. They're going to pull all the gay parades, and now it's going to become immigration riots, and we're going to be fighting each other. It's going to become in an internal cancer where we fight ourselves, and it might come to the point where we reach a a state where we declare martial law. It's an emergency, and we pull the election. Those types of things. All I'm saying is we can't allow this to become an emergency. We know that the wall is bleeding. It's kind of being on a ship, and water's just coming through. We are ignoring it now because it's a little bit of water, but you cannot address it at the point at which we're already sinking. So don't think about this when it's too late. Make this a pivotal piece of discussion. Don't be afraid to have uncomfortable, real conversations, because I think we're all coming from heartfelt places. Nobody wants to be lacking of empathy and not have a heart for people's struggles. But that needs to be on balance with everybody's struggles and consider all the other nuances that, again, why we need liberals and Democrats, or liberals and conservatives together, or Democrats and Republicans together, is you need people thinking about the heart and feelings of people on balance with the logic and reality that hurts sometimes. And sometimes, and just look at the facts.
Yeah, it's not pretty. You can't take everyone in, and you can't, the unfortunate part is not every American can have the American dream or even their American dream. There just isn't enough space available, or there's not enough opportunities for that available either. And it's not, I don't think a lot of this really doesn't come from a racist thing. It comes from maybe a profiling of the unattended consequence of the baggage your decision and the decisions of those in your community bring to this. That's the real issue. And that's one that you're right. There's going to be a point of no return when we go across that event horizon. There is no going back.
Right. Thanks for watching this clip from the Rethink Tank Live. Join us every Tuesday at 7 p.m. streaming across the platforms on YouTube, Rumble, X, Twitch, Facebook, LinkedIn, and TikTok. We do our best to promote user engagement, and we want you involved. So be sure to bring your perspective live so we can get you in the dialogue. See you then.